Is Colorado really everybody's Super Bowl? For me personally, I don't think Shedeur Sanders is all that wrong when he says that, but it may not be for the reasons that you think. Hey, welcome into the Hard Count. This is the People's College Football Show. It is Thursday, July 11th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet, the last one in history. Let's make it a great one, baby. We got a lot to jump into. Talked about, or I referenced already, we're going to talk about Colorado and Shedeur Sanders saying they're everyone's Super Bowl. I got some thoughts on that, but also before we get there, I want to talk about the tiers of quarterbacks in the SEC. And we've done quarterback rankings throughout all of college football, or I guess projections over rankings. I want us to do the ultimate tiers for the quarterbacks in the SEC, and this is not your mom's tiers, all right? These are very different sort of quirky kind of tiers. We went all out. I'll leave it at that. We went all out, and that'll make more sense when we get there. Who needs to win a college football playoff game this season? Not just make the dance. Anybody can make the dance. Anybody can make the dance. That's been well established. But to actually do something when you get there, that's a little bit different. So who has a chance to do that? And then also, who do I think needs to do that? We'll unpack that together. There's been a social graphic. I'll take that back. There has been multiple social graphics that have been circulating the internet talking about how Oregon has unlimited NIL. And those graphics make that look like a factual statement. And I'm not here to tell you that it's not, but I do think we need to provide some context as to where those graphics are coming from and why that's being reported the way that it is right now on the social media side of things. SEC Media Days, they're around the corner. We'll tell you what we're fired up for. And also, who deserves more love in college football? We talk about Ohio State, talk about Texas, talk about Georgia. We talk about all those teams, but who is maybe flying under the radar just a little bit? We're going to go show some love to those teams today and have a great time doing it. Man, it's a big-time Thursday. Big-time Thursday. Going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, but man off camera right now. Big kickball game last night. Went yard more than once. All right? I'll leave it at that. I'll let him unpack that for you. Got a lot to talk about. If you're watching live, you guys know the drill already. We appreciate you in advance. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Just helps us do more content that you want to see. If you're listening on podcast, you're a real one because that meant, okay, I can't see the live show. I can't make time. I got a meeting. I got class. I got whatever. But you found time to go check out the pod, and we appreciate you for that. Y'all been crushing it on that side of things. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast feed or left a review, would appreciate it if you did so. It helps us. And a little bit of personal news, a little bit later. But at the end of the show, got some personal news for you, and excited to share that with y'all. Okay, let's get right to it, man. Can't waste too much more time. Let's jump right into it. In 2024, who needs to win a playoff game? Notice the verbiage there. Not make the college football playoff. Who needs to win a college football playoff game? Because in 2024, with the expanded field, as you expand the dance to more teams, I think you also, in a lot of ways, turn up the pressure when it comes to expectations. Whereas previously, making the four-team dance is like, hey, good to be in the semifinals. That's awesome. It probably means we won our conference. Probably means that we, had a pretty exciting season in a lot of ways, but I don't think that's good enough anymore. And I'll tell you a few teams. Georgia would obviously be on this list. I think that they are one of those teams that you probably don't need to explain too much as to why they probably need to win a college football playoff game. The standard for them is much higher, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. But Ohio State is who I really want to talk about right now. Because for them, if they don't win a college football playoff game this year, I think that you're left after the season probably sitting on the couch as the game just finished on the television, and you're like, man, but our roster was so good. Our staff was so solid. This was supposed to be the year. And honestly, the good folks in Columbus, they're expecting a lot more than just a college football playoff win. They're expecting like a college football national championship, a college football playoff national title, excuse me. So if they beat Michigan and they get to the dance and they have a bye, and they're still left sitting there with the confetti on the ground, and it's not for them, it's going to feel very empty. And we've said this a lot about Ohio State, man. To whom much is given, much is required. The old Peter Parker and Uncle Ben conversation. With great power comes great responsibility. With great roster talent for Ryan Day comes great responsibility. If you don't get it done this season, win a national title, that is, you're left saying, okay, when's it going to happen? But if you don't win a college football playoff game, I think that things will get very uncomfortable very, very quickly in Columbus. Right now, they have the second best odds to win the whole freaking thing. So, yeah, Ohio State winning a playoff game, that is the bare minimum for them out there in Columbus. For Texas, I think they got to win a playoff game. Because last year, it felt a lot like, okay, Texas is here now. But if they were to win a college football playoff game, then you look at what happened last year and say, okay, yeah, that was real. Now, I've told you many times, Texas fans, I think last year was real. I have no doubts about that. However, when you look at what would be said if you don't achieve at a high level in 2024, first year in the SEC, people would look back and say, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. They lost 2 All-Americans on the defensive line. You lost 2 NFL draft picks at wide receiver. Of course, Texas took a step back. I don't think that's the conversation you want to have about your football team going into the new conference that is the best in college football, which is the SEC. Good teams, they can win at a high level for 1 year. Good programs, though, they have sustained success over an extended period of time. And that's what Texas is now striving to do. So it would legitimize last year, and also it would, as I already alluded to, kind of turn down all that volume around the SEC this, the SEC that, Texas can't this, Texas can't that, and that would be a good way to live if you're a Texas fan. All right, Oregon. They have too good of a roster, in my opinion, to not win a college football playoff game. And the big thing for me with Oregon is momentum is just so critical for them. It's critical. Like, whenever you're climbing a mountain, and Oregon is right now climbing the mountain that is the college football world, whenever you take a second to breathe, or whenever you take a second to, like, collect yourself, and I can say this from experience, I climbed Mount Rainier 4-ish years ago. I hate heights, first of all. But second of all, every time I stopped, that mountain looked a lot steeper. I lost momentum. It was a lot harder to regain that momentum of climbing up that mountain. That's Oregon right now. Right now, they're kind of that hot brand. Dan Lanning, I've told you many times, I think he is one of the best young coaches in college football. He is probably, right now, for my money, the most potential in college football coach or player. Like, I'm buying stock in Dan Lanning like it's going out of style. With that being said, if they were to have a lackluster first season in the Big Ten, start to reevaluate, okay, well, what is Oregon? What is Dan Lanning? What are the Ducks? I think that would be something that people are saying. So you got to keep momentum. You got to keep it rolling. And it's also worth noting, too, for Oregon, they do not live in a They are not near high school recruits that live in a talent-rich state. No shade on Oregon. Like, let's just be real here. The players that Oregon is going to go after is in California, Texas, Florida, Georgia. So they have to make a case to be visible to these teams, and performing at a high level, winning a college football playoff game would be a great way to do that. Now, for Ole Miss, they have the 5th best odds to win the national championship. Winning a college football playoff game, to me, I've sort of talked myself into this situation where, okay, that probably needs to happen for them. I think making the college football playoff at this point feels like it should happen. And if it sounds like we're asking a lot of Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, it's because we are, because they understand now this is a year where you got to make something happen. Like, if you can have success by relying super heavily on the portal, and I'm not just talking about taking like a couple players here, a couple players there. Florida State would be, I guess, the most portal-heavy team that we've seen win at the highest level, winning their conference title game. But for Ole Miss, if they win at the highest level, if they go out and win a college football playoff game with how heavily they lean on the portal, taking like 20 guys a cycle, then you, 1, legitimize Lane Kiffin and his way of doing things. And 2, I think, like we said many times here, if you're in the transfer portal, you look at Ole Miss now as a destination of a place that's only going to continue to crescendo. And what they did over the course of this last offseason through the portal, they got some very key ingredients. Very, very key ingredients. They beefed up the defensive line. They kept Jackson Dart from going to the NFL, not the portal. They're primed to do something big this year. In Ole Miss, they were at first, I think, after that New Year's Six bowl win, thinking playoff. Now I think they're thinking win a playoff game with the way they've attacked through the portal and the way that they are situated going into 2024. Alabama, they need to win a playoff game, if you ask me. I think we've talked a lot about the external, optics for Bama and validation externally and all that, but for Alabama, and if you can win a college football playoff game, it takes care of that side of things. But how about the internal validation? How about for this locker room? Because a lot of these guys now were recruited by Nick Saban. They came to Alabama to play for the GOAT. And everyone that stayed now is choosing to play for Kalen DeBoer. But if you have success at that kind of level and you win a college football playoff game, it's like, okay, Bama's still Bama. Like, and I'm not saying that if they don't get that done, they're going to see this portal exodus or anything like that, but I am saying that if you're in that locker room, you have more buy-in based on results. Like, that's just kind of the way this whole thing works. So for Alabama, I do think that it's important for them to win a college football playoff game, and I do think it would help recruiting, as we've mentioned already many a time before on this show. Now, when I put this question out on my Twitter page at JD Pickell, y'all responded as you always do in elite fashion. But it was very interesting to me that one team kept popping up and getting traction. And the more I thought about it, I think the more that I agreed with y'all. Y'all believe, and I'm now on board, that Notre Dame needs to win a college football playoff game. I think that's fair to say. And for Notre Dame fans, they've sort of had this feeling for a while, and since before Marcus Freeman got there, that like they've always had the ingredients to compete at the highest level. They've made college football playoff games before. They hadn't won one just yet. They've made national titles before. They hadn't won one in a long time. And so now there's this feeling of like, okay, when is it going to happen? And if it's going to happen, it feels like year 3 under Marcus Freeman would be that year because of how he attacked through the portal as well, at the skill player positions, at the quarterback position, who they bring back on defense. Like Notre Dame, I think as a overall reputation in college football is people view them as like that friend that's always telling you what they're about to do. That friend, you know that friend now. They're always about to take a trip. They're always about to start a business. They're always about to go back to school. They're always about to do something, but then a couple of months pass, turns into a year, turns into 2 years, and guess what? They haven't done it. That's not Marcus Freeman. They've clearly made strides since he's been there from a roster level, from a recruiting standpoint, and I think that this is going to be the year where they compete at the highest level and I believe have a very good chance to go out and obviously make the college football playoff. According to Vegas, they have minus odds to make the dance. And then in addition to that, I think they're going to have a chance to win a college football playoff game depending on who they draw. So who needs to win a playoff game in 2024? Georgia, yeah, we'll throw them in the mix there. I think they have higher expectations than that. But the real teams we want to talk about here, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Notre Dame. Expectations. Expand the field, that's great, but expectations, they ramp up with that. So let me know who else y'all think. Y'all have answered on my Twitter page, and we appreciate you for that, but let me know who else y'all think needs to win a college football playoff game. All right, I'm going to toy with our title here really quick. If you're watching live, I'm messing around a little bit with our YouTube. So don't mind us behind the curtain, just doing what we do. If you're watching live as well, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you so much for that. But we got a lot to jump into. Man, next time we do this show, too, this is the kind of crazy part about this. Next time we do this show, we will be in Dallas, Texas. We'll be on Radio Row. It'll be a lot of fun. So excited to that. Excited to see y'all there. And also next time we do this show, college football playoff or college football 25. For some of y'all will be, I believe, in your possession. For others, there will be a massive countdown to that game actually coming out, so that'll be a good time. But regardless, it's about that time. It's about that time for us to get into that. So if you're watching live and saw us mess with the old YouTube algorithm there, we appreciate you just kind of sitting tight. Oh, I'll have a typo in there. Let me mess with this again. One sec. Okay, we're off to the races. You gotta have the right SEO for your shows. It's always crucial. All right, roll party roll. So, as I alluded to yesterday on my Twitter page, we got the ultimate SEC quarterback tiers for 2024. Now, if you've been tuned in for a while, you know that not that long ago, we gave you our quarterback rankings. I'll rephrase that. We gave you our quarterback projected rankings for 2024. So not where they stand currently, but where they're going to be at the end of the season. This is a little bit different. This isn't so much a ranking as it is a tier. I want you to think more about groups over specific quarterbacks being ahead of other quarterbacks, all right? So full disclaimer too, I think the SEC has the best quarterback play in all of college football. I think it is the deepest quarterback conference in all of college football. And I think as we go through this list, you kind of look at who's in what group and you're like, man, that guy's in the lower tier. Like that's a good player. He could probably be a top end player in X, Y, and Z conference, but in the SEC, it's brutal, man. It's brutal. So I want to work from the bottom up here. And the first tier that we're going to address together is that seeing is believing in college football for us. Like, very much so like Santa Claus and your buddy's benchmarks. I need to see it before I can totally buy into the idea that that's actually going to be what happens. That's not a knock on what they are currently. It's just a question, quite frankly. Seeing is believing. And so who I have in that group is Peyton Thorne, Jackson Arnold, Lenoris Sellers, Blake Shapen, Taylon Green, and then whoever ends up winning that Vanderbilt quarterback competition. I think it's going to be the New Mexico State transfer, but I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the year it was Nate Johnson, the transfer from Utah. Peyton Thorne and Jackson Arnold to me are the most interesting. Let's start with Peyton Thorne. We've seen him do it at a high level at Michigan State. Like, we went and sat down with Hugh Freeze this past spring, and he's like, yeah, the dude threw for I don't know how many thousand yards when he was at Michigan State. That's still big-time football, still the Big Ten. Not like he's a G5 transfer trying to find his way at Auburn. Like, yes, it's the SEC. That's difficult. But I really think that for him, the excitement level, if I'm an Auburn fan, should be a bit higher than what you got to see last year because of Hugh Freeze running the offense, because of the fact that you got him more weapons, because of the fact he got spring practice. And then Jackson Arnold is interesting, too, because a lot of what you were excited about him with, if you're an Oklahoma fan, is the fact that he was a 5-star player coming out of high school. And so you saw him at the end of last year a little bit. You saw him in the bowl game, and there was a lot of good, I believe, in that bowl game, but there was also quite a few turnovers that made you nervous. Seeing is believing for this group. Lenoris Sellers and Taylon Green, I think, are very similar in the sense that both have tremendous physical tools. Taylon Green, transferred from Boise State. If you don't know that name, he is a walking highlight. Go ahead and YouTube Taylon Green and what he did over there at Boise State. He's 6'6", 223 pounds, jumping over people, defying physics. So, I mean, he's a baller. Lenoris Sellers, they're really excited about him at South Carolina, and they got some dudes out there. So keep an eye on those two. I'm excited for them. Blake Shapen, transferred from Baylor to Mississippi State. I really like the fit for him and Jeff Lebby's air raid offense. I've told this story before, but I was out there in Jerry World when Baylor was playing Oklahoma State for the Big 12 championship game. Blake Shapen has to play in that game when he hasn't been the starter pretty much all season, and walks in there, and the ball barely touched the floor that first half. I mean, he was dealing. So just because we haven't seen Blake Shapen have that kind of success since that game, consistently at least, I think what Jeff Lebby is going to allow him to do should have the folks in Stark Vegas feeling pretty excited. So I'll leave it at that. But that group, again, I'm not knocking them. To me, it's just I need to see a little bit more before I have 110% belief. But the top end of that group for me, again, would be Peyton Thorne, and it would be Jackson Arnold. So this is the next tier that this is why we call it the ultimate tier. You're not going to see a tier like this on any other college football rankings or any other college football shows rankings or tiers, whatever. This is the group that I trust like I trust my Uber Eats order. And what I mean by that is, like, we've all ordered from Uber Eats, and if you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. They don't sponsor the show, but if you're watching right now and you're an Uber Eats fan, or you're high up with Uber Eats, let us know. I usually feel pretty good about what I'm getting in that bag when they drop it off on my doorstep. Like 90% of the time, the order's correct, the food is quality, the food is hot if it's supposed to be hot, and like everything looks to be in order. However, we've all had that 5% of the time where you check the bag and you're like, ah, man, they forgot my fries, they forgot the sauce, they forgot the straw, they forgot the drink, whatever. So there's that little bit of hesitation that you have, but at the same time, you feel pretty good about them for the most part. In this group, I have Graham Mertz, Connor Wegman, and Brock Vandergriff. Now, Graham Mertz, good year in 2023. Was getting dunked on like crazy when he transferred from Wisconsin, and everyone was saying what he wasn't going to do and how many turnovers he had, and then he went out and had 3 interceptions, almost 3,000 yards, and 20 touchdowns. Graham Mertz had a difficult situation that he walked into at Florida, and I mean, quite frankly, they did not have enough weapons for him to be able to, I think, play as well as he could have first year in the system, but like, I think he's set up for success. I feel pretty good about him. Now, the thing that you're looking at, the thing that you're wondering about if you're a Florida fan is like, all right, is there a chance now that old Graham Mertz shows back up at some point in time during this season? You don't think so, but still, like that Uber Eats order, you're just going to check the bag, make sure, okay, I feel good about this. Let's roll. Connor Wegman, extremely, extremely high floor. We've seen him play really well in a small sample size. The problem for my guy is he just can't stay healthy. But when we've seen him be able to stay healthy, like he was a 5-star for a reason now. Okay, he was what he was coming out of high school for a reason. I think that this new system for him could ultimately be the difference. I think the weapons around him are solid and I think the running game as well is going to be more than solid. If they can protect him, that's going to be a massive factor, but also just him staying healthy is really the end-all, be-all for me with him. If he can stay healthy, I think A&M is somewhere like a 9, potentially 8-win football team, depending on how those games go. Not their ceiling, but that's kind of where I'd peg them at right now. Now, Brock Vandagriff is the one that probably raises the most eyebrows if you're watching this and he's in this group for you, because he hasn't really played a whole lot of college football. Transfer over from Georgia. My thing with Brock Vandagriff is like he was a 5-star player out of high school, and just because you didn't beat out Carson Beck, who is going to appear later on this list, doesn't mean you can't play ball. And when we were tracking this quarterback battle last spring and into last fall camp, there was a lot of rumblings over at Dogs HQ that like, hey, Carson Beck is playing really well. He's been around for a long time, but like Brock Vandagriff, man, he's making it tough on this staff. Now, it sounds like ultimately Carson Beck was just the more consistent option, but Brock Vandagriff is a good athlete. He's got a rocket for an arm. And also, man, he's got Dane Brown. Dane Brown and Berrien Brown and Dane Key, I played college football with a guy named Dane Brown. So, Dane Brown, if you're watching, shout out. Dane Key and Berrien Brown, two of, I believe, the most electric young wide receivers in college football, could stretch the field. I'm just saying, if Brock Vandagriff is similar to what they wanted Devin Leary to be last year, I think is a more mobile option, honestly. I wouldn't sleep on Brock Vandagriff. I feel pretty good about how he's going to translate over to that system out there at Kentucky. Now, this next tier is the group that I'm most excited about. Not necessarily the creme de la creme, but the group that I am most excited about, and that is the get your popcorn ready kind of tier. And Nick Bragg's our resident movie buff. Like, before you walk into the theater, you get the popcorn, the excitement starts to build. You sit down before the previews if you're a real junkie, and then like you're locked in, you're ready because you feel like something big is about to happen. That's how I feel about this group. We got Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Brady Cook from Missouri, Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, and Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee. Now, this tier, again, is more of a projection than a current ranking. Jackson Dart's going into year 3 in the system, and if he takes a step like he did from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, like all bets are off. If he's able to be a quicker decision maker, if he's able to improve on things that maybe he saw in his game last year that weren't at a level he wanted them to be at, they're going to be dangerous because they have more weapons for him to throw the football to. Juice Wells is there. Trey Harris is back. Tight end play is good. Like they're going to be in good shape. So Jackson Dart is about to have a massive, massive season. He was in that top 5 for us when it came to college football quarterbacks in the sport, period. I'm excited about Jackson Dart. Jalen Milroe, I've said this many times too, I think he's a Heisman finalist. I really do. I've talked myself into that. And the way that it felt to me at first, I was like, I don't know. His game is very different than Michael Penix Jr. I don't know how that's going to fit with Kalen DeBoer's system. And then the more that I thought about it, the more that I looked at it, the more that we saw Jalen Milroe in the spring game, I was like, okay, this is going to work. And it's a lot. Like the comp for me is like, people who dip their French fries in milkshakes, it sounds like it wouldn't work. It sounds like it'd be weird, but then you try it and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I ever live my life without this? That's Jalen Milroe in this offense. They're going to equip him to be a more consistent passer by giving him more access throws, giving him more layups to call a spade, and then they're going to create a lot of space for him to do what he does and be special in the open field. Calling my shot, he'll be a Heisman finalist. Brady Cook, no Cody Schrader, lose some production on defense. You lose your defensive coordinator from last year, but all that means is they're going to put more weight on number 12's shoulders and ask him to do what he does and be Mr. Brady Let Him Cook. The encore performance we're asking for is 29 total touchdowns, over 3,000 yards passing, and they got some weapons for him to do that. Theo Weiss Jr., he's back. One of the more underrated wide receivers in college football. Luther Burden, the best wide receiver in college football, he's also back. So I think Brady Cook getting another year under his belt and having those weapons back with him, that chemistry, I think it's going to make for a really explosive season and a big year for number 12 out there in Columbia. Now, Garrett Nussmeier has not been the guy yet at LSU. He's going to be this season. And that offense, now you lose Mike Denbrock to Notre Dame, but Joe Sloan, I believe, still had a pretty heavy influence on what happened last year offensively and all the success Jaden Daniels had. Yes, you lose 2 first-round picks to the NFL draft. They still got some dudes out there. I have gone on record and said I think Lacey and Nussmeier, Kyron Lacey that is, the wide receiver out there, and Garrett Nussmeier, who I'm mentioning right now, is going to be one of the top 10 duos in college football. CJ Daniels, a 1,000-yard receiver from Liberty. This offense, man, it's built to be full throttle wide open. Okay, that is how they want to live. And going into last season, the thing we talked a lot about on this show is like, hey, can Jaden Daniels unhitch the wagon? Like, can he push it deep just a little bit more? That's not a problem for Garrett Nussmeier, man. Like, he's one of those guys where you got to pull the reins back a little bit. And I think that's something they've worked on really since he's been at LSU and kind of dialed him in a little bit more. Good decisions mean big numbers, mean a lot of points being scored in Baton Rouge. So Garrett Nussmeier, I believe, will have a big year this year. And then the final one is Nico Iamaleava. And he's another guy that probably will catch some flack for having him on the list, and that's fine, having him in this tier because he hasn't been the guy at Tennessee just yet. He started the bowl game, looked really good running the football, played against a really good defense, so it was hard to get a great gauge for him as a processor of actual college football defenses in Iowa. But the thing with Nico, like there's something that's a little bit unquantifiable when you talk about him and what he's going to be in Knoxville this year. Like, he fits this tier perfectly for me because it feels like we're about to experience something really big. Like the way that he's talked about, the way that Josh Heupel talks about him, the way that we got to see him practice when he was out there during spring football. Like, the dude's special. The dude's very special. There's a reason why he was the number 1 player for us here at On 3 in that 2023 cycle. One thing that I don't know gets talked enough about Nico, dude's maturity is off the charts. Like, there's all this talk around NIL and what he's getting and what, all the things he's going to be at Tennessee, and like, he's kept it very low profile. Everything that we've heard internally about him at Tennessee has been off the charts, hard worker, leader, guys love him. Like, I'm just saying, I think that matters for a guy in his position, and I think the system and what Nico brings to the table from a skill set perspective is going to be a match made in heaven. So I think all of those guys are about to have a massive season in 2024. That's a lot of quarterbacks now. I understand that, but looking at what's drawn up for them and look at the way that they have some continuity, especially with Milroe, Dart, and Cook, like, we're not asking for the moon here from those guys. We're asking them to just kind of build on what they did last year. Now, there's one final tier here with 2 more quarterbacks, and that is Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers. And the tier that I have them in is, like, I would trust these individuals with my life. Like, if you told me, hey, JD, got good news, I got bad news. The bad news is if we don't score on this drive, that's the end of the road for you, brother. Like, you will have breathed your last breath. Morbid, I know, but just roll with me here. Good news, you get to pick your quarterback. Okay, I'm taking either Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck, and I don't really care who it is. The reason why I'm so high on both these dudes, the production speaks for itself. Like, I mean, Carson Beck threw for almost 4,000 yards last year. Quinn Ewers threw for north of 3,400, right around 3,500. The thing that I love about both these guys, they're savvy. They have a high completion percentage. Quinn Ewers with 69%. Carson Beck with 70-ish percent. 72%, I believe it was exactly. Both of them take care of the football. Like, Carson Beck had 6 interceptions last year. He had 0 multi-interception games. Quinn Ewers, throughout his entire career, has only had 2 multi-interception games. So the point I'm trying to make here is the way these guys have sort of taken on the field general role and the way that they have proven like they are going to be consistent, which is a big thing for Quinn Ewers now based on what he did last year. I think they're the best in college football, not just the SEC. If my life was on the line and we needed to score on one drive, like, I have no issue passing either one of those dudes the keys. So let's review here, shall we? The ultimate SEC quarterback tiers for us here. Got it broken up into several unique tiers. The first tier, I guess the first tier moving up, is Seeing is Believing. I got Peyton Thorne at Auburn, Jackson Arnold, Lenoris Sellers at South Carolina, Blake Shapen at Mississippi State, Taylor Green at Arkansas, and then Vandy in their quarterback room, which is not to throw shade. We're going to see who ends up winning that job. Again, I'll go on record. I think Nate Johnson is your guy long term. And then there's the group that I trust. Think they're good. I trust them, but I trust them like I trust my Uber Eats order. Just want to double check. Just want to take a look. I feel good, but I just want to double check. Graham Mertz at Florida. Just don't revert back to Wisconsin. Graham Mertz will be in good shape. Connor Wegman, can we stay healthy? That's a big part of this. And Brock Vandagriff. Haven't seen him hit the field just yet, but like 5-star caliber cat. Just because you didn't play at Georgia doesn't mean we got to knock you for that, all right? Now, the Popcorn Ready tier is about to have a major, major season, very similar to Boom Watch, if you've been tuned into this show for any length of time. Jackson Dart's going to have a massive year. Jalen Moto and Kalen DeBoer, I think, is just going to be, I think it's going to be just poetry. Brady Cook, yes, you lose some pieces around you, but I think he's still set to have a really good season, and they're going to ask more of him, and you'll see his production have an uptick. Garrett Nussmeier, wide open offense. That's how he likes to live his life, baby. Wide open, full throttle. Nico Iamaleava, something special to him. I'm excited to watch it. And then the group that I trust my life with, Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers. So let me know where y'all disagree. Again, I'm very much so looking forward to us having 100% agreement across the board. I think that's probably about to happen. But if it's not, just let me know and we'll have a conversation about that. All right, so 2 things are in order. One is caffeine, and the second is random college football player of the day. So I'm going to take a swig here as y'all can take a guess at who that might be. All right, let's roll. Random college football player of the day is none other than Rakeem Cato. Remember Rakeem Cato played at Marshall from 2011 to 2014, multiple time Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year, Conference USA MVP in 2012. His stat line is just stupid. Threw for over 14,000 yards during his career at Marshall. All right, threw for 131 touchdowns, 44 interceptions. They were slinging it around the yard. He had over 1,153 for those keeping track at home. Career attempts. He was just fun to watch, man. Like, I have vivid memories in my mind during bowl season of Rakeem Cato and the Marshall Thundering Herd just tearing it up against, insert whatever random team you want there into that bowl season. I don't remember who it was, but I remember Rakeem Cato doing numbers, and their aerial attack was fun to watch, man. So Rakeem Cato, shouts to him, random college football player of the day. If you're watching live, like the video, subscribe to the channel, roll party roll. Thank you so much. All right, so Shedeur Sanders made a little bit of waves yesterday when he was at Big 12 Media Days, and someone asked him, hey, do you feel an obligation to perform at a different level beyond, Deion Sanders' son? Which I don't think is an unfair question. I think that makes sense. And the way that he answered it is really what drew some reaction from the Twitter sphere. And it's Twitter. It is what it is. It's not real life, but it had a reaction nonetheless. He basically said, yes, of course I do. And then he went on to say, I understand now that with us at Colorado, we're going to be everyone's Super Bowl. Those are the words that he used, and that was the phrase that I think really set off most of social media. So what social media quickly came with is hey, y'all haven't made a bowl game. Y'all are that school that is playing for clicks. Y'all are the social media school. Y'all are this, y'all are that. And there was such a reaction saying no, you're not nobody's Super Bowl. All right, why don't you relax a little bit? And originally, hand up, I kind of had that same reaction. I was kind of man, don't know if that's really the verbiage that I would have used if I were Shedeur Sanders. But as I thought about it more, I was man, I don't know that he's all that wrong. But from a competitive perspective, yes, Colorado is not going to have the same kind of draw as the Super Bowl. Colorado went 4-8 last year, have an over-under win total of 5.5. Again, these are just facts. We're not hating. Teams in the NFL, if we're using the comp of the Super Bowl, that went around 500 last year were the Buccaneers, the Saints, the Bengals, not necessarily Super Bowl teams. So no, from a competitive perspective, the internet's right. Colorado is not a Super Bowl kind of opponent for teams, just to call a spade here. Now, however, I don't think that's exactly what Shedeur Sanders was speaking to when he said that we're going to be everybody's Super Bowl. What I think he meant was, or the way that I would agree with him was, Colorado is so polarizing and such a visible brand now in the college football landscape to where when you see them on the schedule, you circle that and you say, all right, we better lock in for that one for a lot of reasons. Because, again, going to have a national draw to it based on the viewership point of view, a lot of eyeballs on you. 2, whatever you do will probably end up on a YouTube video or social media clip that will get a pretty high degree of traction. Well Off Media has almost 500,000 subscribers, which is Deion Sanders' son YouTube channel, which has a lot of Deion Sanders Jr., that is, excuse me, which has a tremendous following, and it's a lot of Colorado football-centric content. Colorado has invited, though, that kind of attention onto themselves, which I have no issue with. Like, that was part of the draw with bringing Deion Sanders to Colorado to be your head coach. They have invited that kind of polarizing reputation that they currently have. And so some of it's what they do on social media. Some of it's how they speak to the media. Like Deion Sanders, when he beat TCU and they beat TCU, he walks in and he's like, hey, do you believe now? And I understand the thought behind it, saying like, all right, we took care of business. Who believes in us now? But what, in my mind, what that did was that caused people to have to pick sides. Are you in or out on Colorado? When, in fairness, like, it was the first game. So to ask someone to be in or out on you overall, like, I understand where he's coming from, but from like where I'm standing, it's like, I want to see a little bit more. I want to see what happens the rest of the season. Full transparency, I think that was fair for us to assume that. So when it comes to the rest of what they're going to be long term, yes, they're inviting some attention onto themselves, and that's fine. Like they're going to promote themselves. But the more you promote yourself, and the more that you speak about yourself, that causes there to be a larger target on yourself. So that's fine, and I have no issue with that. I have no issue with anybody talking trash or saying they're going to do X, Y, and Z thing. And the reason why is because in college football, eventually rubber meets road. At some point in time, we have to line it up, and we have to actually have a game being played. And that's why this part of the season is always a little bit, hollow, because, you have someone like me who sits behind a microphone and says, I think this is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen. But the reality is those games are going to be played. And so whatever I think, whatever anybody else thinks, doesn't actually matter. Whatever anybody else says doesn't actually matter. But if you're actually going to line it up between the white lines, you have something to say and how you feel about yourself or your opponent, I'm all for it. But understand now, there's going to be a time where that has to be backed up. So is Colorado everyone's Super Bowl, quote unquote? Not necessarily. I don't think they're everyone's Super Bowl when it comes to how they're going to be viewed as a competitor. Like they're not at this point in time Alabama or Texas or Georgia. But at the same time, that's why you brought Deion Sanders to Colorado, was to have that national relevance, was to be a visible brand in college football. And I've said this before, that's why I think last year in a lot of ways should be considered a success at Colorado. Like if you thought Colorado was going to go 8-4 last year, who is that on? Not on Colorado. They won one game last year. Over-under was right around three games, one game the year prior to Deion Sanders getting there. It's not on Colorado that you changed your expectations after the TCU game. Nobody forced you to do that. Nobody said that you had to put this high expectation on Colorado as they got to, the 3-0 mark. Like, it is what it is. It's a longer play, I believe, for Deion Sanders to have success there, and I'm excited to see what it is long term. But Shedeur Sanders is not wrong, man. With the way that Colorado operates, with how visible they are, they will get everyone's best shot. And you know what? The good thing with Deion Sanders, the good thing with that group out there, I think they welcome it. I think they understand that. And at some point in time now, the games will be played. And I can't wait for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Going to be a lot of fun. All right, rolling right along here. Make sure you like the video. We'll keep a good thing going. There's been a little bit of a social media report, if you will, and I'll use report in quotes, that Oregon has unlimited NIL resources. Now, you've probably seen this on Instagram from various pages, and they're not necessarily trying to feed misinformation, but I do think it has been taken with a little bit too much of a literal nature to it. If you're watching right now, make sure you subscribe. We appreciate you in advance for that. College football, nothing but college football, every single day right here on this channel. So make sure you're locked in. Make sure you're following on the podcast. Make sure you're following me on the social channels at JD Pickell. We appreciate you so much for that. That's on Instagram and on Twitter, by the way. So where this whole thing is coming from is there was a tweet that came out, and it was a true tweet to my understanding. Rick Neuheisel, former head coach of college football, does a great job now in the media, said on ESPN, College Football XM, so a radio show, that he went to a recent coaches event and said that it is no secret that Phil Knight, Nike essentially, wants to see a national championship. He's 86 years old. He's getting older in age. He wants to see a natty. And so the way the tweet was worded is, it's no secret that Phil Knight is supplying unlimited resources to Oregon on the NIL front. It also said that they are willing to pay whatever it takes. Now, is this true? I think in theory it could be true. But I think the thing that people took from this was a literal, legal, hey, Nike has opened up the war chest. They will give you whatever. There's no limit to what they're going to give you, all right? Is that true? I think unlimited feels a lot more like another word for a lot. You know, like I don't think they're actually giving them like billions of dollars, if that makes sense. There's no legal receipts that prove that Oregon is getting unlimited resources from Nike. But however, if Nike wanted to, they probably could, just so we're on the same page. But the thing that was a little bit interesting out of this whole thing, out of this whole, report that more or less, I guess, came out, and report feels like the wrong word, but this rumbling that came out was a lot of people said, see, told you. Told you Oregon was always buying players. They were always just dropping the bag, and that's why they're having success now in the portal and on the recruiting trail. The first thing I would say, which we've said a lot on this show, like if that's what's happening, if they are dropping a bag and they are landing players, good for Oregon. Like if that's truly what it comes down to, them having more money than you or them being willing to spend more money than you, who is that a reflection on? Is it a reflection on Oregon for being willing to pony up and go get big-time players? Or is it a reflection on you for not being able to have the funds to compete with them? You say, JD, yeah, but they're Nike. Okay. Do you want to win college football games? How bad do you want that recruit? If you want it as much as Oregon wants it, okay, then let's play ball. But if you're not matching them financially and you're complaining about that, and that's the reason why you're complaining, like that's the reason why I think they're landing players, like I don't know if it's a good look to yell about being broke. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. Other thing I would say here that's a little bit off-putting about the way people have responded to this narrative of Oregon having unlimited NIL is like the thought that Oregon is just purely being able to pay players and that's the only reason why they're landing them. To me, that's just disrespectful. To me, that means you haven't really been paying attention to what Oregon's actually doing. Well, hey, JD, they landed 2 quarterbacks in the transfer portal. 2 top 3 guys in Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore. Like, come on. That has a lot to do with money, right? If we're using, common sense here, yeah, they probably didn't get either of those guys for free. But also, are those guys picking Oregon if Bo Nix doesn't have the season he's had last year or the resume he's had since he got to Oregon? If Bo Nix isn't projected to be a first-round pick or trending that way, which he ultimately ended up being? I think that probably factors in as much, if not more heavily than NIL. Well, JD had DeCorian Moore. Come on, Evan Stewart. Those guys, like, they for sure bought those guys, right? I don't know what the NIL specifics are for either of those individuals. Yes, if they were, if we're going off just their rating, probably have a higher price point than the average wide receiver. But are they even considering Oregon if they don't have anybody that's had solid production at the wide receiver position? If either of those guys don't see a path to them going and playing at the highest level, which is ultimately the NFL? I don't think so. Oregon had 2 1,000-yard receivers last year in Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin. Maybe that helped their case as well in landing those guys. So to say that it's just a money thing to me is disrespectful to what Oregon's done, to what Dan Lanning has done since he's got there. And make no mistake, too, like, Dan Lanning is about that life. Like, there's this thought, I think, a little bit that they're just dropping a bag at the 11th hour, after a few phone calls, very little effort put in, and the bag is really what sealed the deal. Nobody's denying that the bag helps. I'm sure it does help. But unless you know without a shadow of a doubt that's the reason why they're landing these kids, I would maybe back off just a little bit. Because when I look at Dan Lanning, man, like I said, he understands what it is. Like, he understands recruiting is what fuels everything. I'll go back to his very first game against Georgia. Kirby Smart takes the podium. They just waxed Oregon. Post-game, he says, Dan will never tell you this, but we won today because we had better players than them. And that was true. ever since that day, I think that was Dan Lanning's villain origin story, and they have been on a mission when it comes to recruiting. And also, I've said this earlier in the show, I'll say it again, like Oregon is not necessarily the most talent-rich state when it comes to high school football players. It's not saying there isn't really good football players that exist in the state of Oregon, but the large majority are in states that you would have to jump on a plane to go see. Guys that you probably have to jump on a phone call with, to have a conversation with consistently. Dan Lanning, I have to believe, is doing both of those. Like DeCorey and Moore, everyone wants to talk about NIL and being able to land him. Like nobody was really talking about how frequently they were visiting DeCorey and Moore, how much they were building relationships with his family, and all the things that also go into recruiting that everyone seems to want to bypass. And so I think Dan Lanning, does he have support from Nike and Oregon? Like, of course, I would hope so. I think that's probably a big reason why Oregon's having success. I'm not denying that, but I also think to think that's the only ingredient, to me, feels a little bit foolish, a little bit disrespectful. Because at the end of the day, when we talk to a lot of these kids at the NIL Elite Series, and a lot of them tell us the same thing. Yes, NIL matters. However, it's not the only thing. A lot of these kids are thinking NFL more than NIL. All right? NIL doesn't hurt, but I don't think for a lot of these kids it's everything. Take it a step further. People can smell fake from a mile away. It's just some inherent gene we all got. I don't think there's anything fake about Dan Lanning in Oregon. I think the authenticity and the way that he builds relationships and the way that he's been able to continue to build relationships and be real with his players from the time he recruits them to the time they get on campus, I think that matters. I think that's also a very big reason why Oregon has had success. So unlimited NIL feels like a bit of it's like a generic statement. It feels like another word for a lot of NIL from Nike, which we already knew. We already kind of assumed. But regardless, man, it's a lot more than just finances that go into recruiting today. And Oregon is capitalizing on every front. All right, hey, who deserves more love? That's the question we got to ask here. There's some teams that deserve more love in college football, because we talk a lot about the big brands, right? Like, that's pretty straightforward. Like, if you care about your football team and you have a large fan base and you tell us, hey, we care about this team or that team, like, we're going to make sure that we supply what you are demanding. Pretty straightforward. However, though, there's some other teams here that I think deserve to get their shine a little bit. So I want to talk about Syracuse here for a second as one of those teams. Fran Brown is cooking right now. Fran Brown is cooking out there in upstate New York. Fran Brown came over from Georgia. He's got that Kirby Smart blueprint, which is go get the best players, which I don't think is a half-bad strategy. Top 10 portal class currently in college football. Landing Kyle McCord from Ohio State. Say what you want about Kyle McCord. Say what you want about what Ohio State didn't do last year. Lost one football game. Was Kyle McCord perfect? No, but I also think that he was not horrendous like maybe the social media crowd wants to make you think. The ACC is pretty open. They're top 10 in returning production from a bowl team from last season. No Clemson on the schedule. No Florida State on the schedule. They get Miami at home. I'm just saying, Syracuse, give them a little bit more love. Let's not just bypass the orange and all they're doing out there at Syracuse. UCF also deserves a lot more love. Big 12 is wide open. Yeah, Utah and Kansas State and Oklahoma State and Arizona, they're all getting a lot of shine. But UCF, man, Gus Malzahn and KJ Jefferson, that is a fit. Spoke to someone the other day that believes that they are going to let KJ Jefferson just cut it loose. They're going to let him do his thing. They're not going to try and put a governor on that Ferrari. They're going to let him do his thing. They have a top 20 portal class. One of the big gets for them was Penny Boone, who tore up the MAC last year, if you're into Wednesday Night Football. R.J. Harvey, still at UCF. If you don't know that name, he was a 1,400-yard back last season out there in the bounce house. No Kansas State on the schedule. No Oklahoma State on the schedule. They get Arizona at home, and they get Utah at home to end the season. There's a path there. Worth noting, too, Gus Malzahn, one of the most consistent coaches in the sport. He has never won less than 6 games in his 12 years as a head coach. Think about that for a second. That is consistency defined. And he said it yesterday at Media Days. KJ Jefferson is as similar a player physically to Cam Newton as he's ever had. So I'm not saying he's Cam Newton, neither is Gus Malzahn, but he's just saying, hey, his skill set, the way that he's built, big dude that can run the football, we can call quarterback power with him if we want to, that exists with him. Worth noting. Kentucky, man. Let's put some respect on Kentucky's name. Dane Key, Barry, and Brown, I put their names together earlier in the show and called them Dane Brown. Shouts to Dane Brown if you're watching right now. Old college teammate of mine. Brock Vandergrift's a 5-star quarterback. Didn't play at Georgia. Doesn't mean he can't spin it. Doesn't mean he can't be successful in that offense. You have a head coach who, similar to Gus Malzahn, one of the most consistent head coaches in college football. The difference with Mark Stoops is he's done it in the SEC. Like Kentucky, I'll say it, football school. Hand up, they're a football school. And if people don't like that, I mean, we can talk about it offline, but that's how I feel about it. It's also worth noting that Mark Stoops, can't really explain it, but every third year, he seems to pop for a 10-win season. This would be that third year. So I'm not calling my shot for Kentucky to be a 10-win team, but I'm just saying if it were to happen, wouldn't it be the most surprising thing in the whole world? Kentucky, put some respect on their name. Deion Walker as well, 6'6", almost 350-pound defensive lineman for them. Can stuff the run, can rush the passer. Also, Demi Sumo Kongbe, transferred from NC State a season ago. I'm excited to see what he does. He's a guy that I really enjoyed watching in the ACC when he was out there with the Pack a couple of years ago. Curious to see what his share of the load is this upcoming season. Iowa, one more team I want to talk about here. They deserve some love. Iowa, man, they are top 30 in the country in returning production from a 10-win team last year. All right, so what happened was the Big Ten went no divisions. They added Oregon, UCLA, Washington, USC, and all of us in the college football space kind of got amnesia. We kind of got discombobulated, and we're talking about Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and Oregon, and we should. We absolutely should. But, like, if Iowa gets an offense, and that's a big if, but they brought in the new OC, Tim Lester, who they feel really good about, and they should, what's Iowa? Do they factor into that Big Ten title race? I don't think it's irresponsible to assume that they could. Since they've been, since Kirk Ferentz has been there, they have been what feels like the same team every single year. No Michigan on the schedule, no Oregon on the schedule, no Penn State on the schedule. They're at Ohio State. You got Wisconsin, you got Nebraska. Those could be tricky, but like outside of those, man, Iowa's got a path here to potentially do some damage. One more thing I'll say here, as much as we talk about the offense and what they haven't done with the new OC, and with what the portal is now, and hopefully Cade McNamara staying healthy for you, all I'll say is this. It is easier to fix the offense than it is the defense. And the defense at Iowa, if we're trusting the trend here, should be pretty freaking good. You can find a couple of playmakers for you offensively. Cade McNamara hits his stride. Don't sleep on the Hawkeyes. All I'm going to say. So teams that deserve more love, man. Syracuse, UCF, Kentucky, the Wildcats, and Iowa. That's our sound effect out there for the good folks out there in Lexington. All right, so we're about to get to y'all's questions here in a matter of moments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, get in the live chat, all that good stuff here. We got Media Days around the corner, man. SEC Media Days. The next time we are doing a live show, it will be live from Radio Row at the Omni in Dallas, Texas. I cannot wait for it. What are we excited about for next week? I think the obvious thing is Lane Kiffin, man. Every time he touches a microphone is gold. Every single time he's got something to say. Every single Media Days, he has a hilarious moment. Last year was talking about somebody's mom, which, I mean, hey, hands up. I have no idea what's going to happen this year, but it should be a hilarious soundbite, and I'm sure it'll make its way around social media. We can pretty much go ahead and cash that prop bet in right now. Kalen DeBoer, not Nick Saban, is going to be at the podium when Alabama gets to Media Days. And I've said this for a while, really even since Nick Saban retired, like, this is going to be the moment that I think for all of us, it sinks in that, oh, okay, Nick Saban really isn't in college football anymore. He's on College Game Day, and I cannot wait to wake up every Saturday morning and watch him talk some ball, but like, this is the true changing of the guard. And right along with that, I'm assuming Kirby Smart will kind of step into that role as being like the head honcho now for the sport. Brian Kelly, too, probably has something to do with the leadership of the conference and college football as well. Food for thought. Oklahoma and Texas, this is the equivalent of a welcoming party for them. I think it's just going to be tremendous tension. Like the tension of Oklahoma and Texas, the new kids on the block, and they're getting into the SEC, and Texas beat Alabama last year, and all those things, I think just from a pure storyline perspective, should make for a really fun media days. I can't wait for that. Last thing I'll say, too, it's always around this time that we get some big realignment news. I don't think that's coincidental. I think it's usually the powers that be trying to just kind of slip something in there before the season gets rolling, and they kind of just take us by surprise. But I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. I don't know anything. I'm not calling my shot. I'm just saying, y'all, head on a swivel. They like to get us. They like to try and get us got, but this year we will get them before we get got. So they will be the ones that have been gotten. That'll be a lot of fun. So media days around the corner. Lock in with us. Can't wait to see a lot of y'all in Dallas. We'll post a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff on my socials, so follow me there. But should be a lot of fun, man. Media days is here. It's here. Let's get after it. Speaking of getting after it, man, this guy got after it last night to not one, not two, but how many home runs, Nick Brake, in the kickball game? You went yard, brother.
Well, I had 2 home runs and then a bad error that the other team caused, forced a third. But we won.
Okay. Does that feel good?
Felt good. You know what's going to feel good, though? We've got to do some work for game time.
Got to do some work for the good folks at Game Time, baby. I appreciate you reminding me about that.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
We'll get to everyone's questions. Put them in the chat, but first JD's going to talk about the good folks at Game Time.
The good folks at Game Time. Man, Game Time's been good to us, too. We've had them on board. You remember them from the duration of last season. We had them pretty much, it was almost every live show, if not every other live show. So Game Time, man, we appreciate them making it happen for us here. So we're getting into that part of the year now where you're checking the Game Time app and you say, oh, heck yeah. Week 1 tickets on sale. I can go see Clemson and Georgia and Atlanta for how much? I can go see Michigan, Texas week 2, and that costs what? Game Time has got you covered. Best tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed, all right? So here's what you're going to do. You're going to download the Game Time app. Just kind of take a little browse, all right? You take a look at the ticket prices, seeing what games you like. You say, you know what? I wonder if this is the best price. Spoiler alert, it is. It is the best price. One, because Game Time is for the people. That's first of all. Second of all, if it's not, if you find a ticket in the same row or section, or excuse me, same row and section, that should be clarified, same row and section, for less than what you paid for, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's the Game Time guarantee. So, again, download the Game Time app, and I want you to use code HARDCOUNT. That's HARDCOUNT for $20 off your first purchase. We're going to be in Dallas next week. I believe the MLB All-Star Game is out there. If you want to go to that, use code HARDCOUNT. Again, HARDCOUNT for $20 off your first purchase. They also have this great feature to where you know where you're sitting from a view perspective. You're not going to get this great seat and you're like, oh, man, this is awesome. I can't wait for it. You get to the stadium. You're sitting behind the Jumbotron. You're sitting behind the pole. Just a bad deal for everyone. Game Time, they got you covered. It won't happen. So go ahead and take that discount of HARDCOUNT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem code HARDCOUNT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So we appreciate them taking care of us, taking care of y'all, getting us out to some games, man. Getting the people out to the games, for the people and by the people. That's Game Time. So we appreciate them for that. All right, Big Nick, what we got on the chat sphere, brother?
Okay, I've got 3 questions, but first, a Tell JD comment from Rocky Top Tom.
Awesome.
Says, 100% agree with you on the get your popcorn for Nico Iamaleava. I'm certain he'll be who we think he is. What scares me is our lack of experienced offensive line depth and your Wildcat sounds.
The Wildcat sounds are they're kind of getting into midseason form, or they're at least approaching that here, if you will. The thing with the offensive line is fair. The depth isn't massive. That's totally fair to say. I do think, though, if you're able to play that starting 5, the way that they operate offensively, the way that Josh Heupel operates offensively, you're going to be able to compensate for some of maybe what you don't have up front because you're running so many different zone runs, because you're going so quickly. I'll start with the first part of that. A zone run is essentially your offensive line blocking an area instead of having to just dominate your guy up front. Now, you'll take a pancake if you can get it, but if you're just able to kind of get in the way, create some direction for your running back or your ball carrier, that's going to be more than enough of what you need. The speed part of this is massive because as you go up tempo, Tennessee, they're going to be really well conditioned, I promise you. I don't know if their opponents always will be. that tempo is going to be an equalizer to, one, just getting their defense off balance, and two, making them tired. So the offensive line, I think it's a fair question, but I do think they'll be in good shape, and I think Josh Heupel will be able to scheme accordingly.
So this question is from Jared. It says, with Brett Yormark's comments at Big 12 Media Days, do you think the Big 12, if it expands, will go for teams like Florida State, Clemson, Notre Dame, or do you think they're going to look smaller at Oregon State and Washington State?
I mean, I think they swing big. Like, I think they'll go after the biggest brands they can get. I know they would probably be fired up to get a Clemson or a Miami or a Florida State, and I have no idea what's going to happen there. But, yeah, I mean, if you are Brett Yormark, you got to feel pretty good about what you've done so far, because there was a point in time when everything kind of broke loose with the Big 12 and Texas and OU are leaving, and there was this question of, like, what's the Big 12 going to be? Like, I was living in Texas at the time, and I was like, man, I don't know if the Big 12 is going to exist. I don't know if I'm a Big 12 fan, if I would want the Big 12 to exist, if it's just going to be a bunch of, like, island of misfit toys. And Brett Yormark walks in there, adds a bunch of teams, does his thing, goes the entertainment route, which he's done, I mean, throughout the his entire career, quite frankly. And that's, I think, a big reason why he was a fit for the Big 12, is because he doesn't have that athletics or NBA background as the administration background, rather. He's in the business game, and he's crushed it there. So the Big 12, man, they're rolling. They're rolling. I'd like to see them go after the bigger brands, though, to answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Goat Dog, what would your intro song be for your team builder? I'm blasting Vice Versa for the whole state of Georgia. The Truth says TNT by AC/DC. That doesn't surprise me.
Ooh.
What do you think? What's your walkout song? What's your walkout song to life, JD?
Walkout song to life, man. Probably the first song on Coloring Book with Chance. I love that song. It's called All We Got, and it's just like, it's got little trumpets to start, and the beat picks up. I love that song. That'd be my go-to. All We Got by Chance the Rapper's the walkout song. You got one there, Nick?
I don't really like music that people probably know in this chat. I'm old school.
Little Avett Brothers?
I do like the Avett Brothers. I love Phoebe Bridgers, but old school. The Delphonics, Sam Cooke, Jim Croce, some old
Jim
stuff.
Croce. What Jim Croce you like?
Operator. I got a name, something like that, yeah.
That's a good one.
The hits.
That's a good one.
Question from, well, here it is. It's Kevin. He says, who do you think wins in a hypothetical matchup between 2005 Texas and 2008 Florida? This is a football sicko question.
This is a football sicko question. Man, it's so tough, because at first I would lean 2008 Florida, because I'm like, Tebow's a stud. Percy Harvin, I believe, is on that team. Like they were just some game breakers. But then I think about Texas, and I'm like, man, that Vince Young team, like, I don't know if anybody's beating him. I don't know if Vince Young being in the game, anybody's stopping them. So I'll go Texas for the sheer fact that I think Vince Young is a takeover, creative kind of player. But that would be one I'd like to watch. I'd be curious to see what the line is set at. That's a good one. That's a good one. I love it.
Swervo says, what is Nick talking about? Man, Sam Cooke, Jim Croce, that's classic music. If you don't know that,
it's good stuff.
You need to listen.
I'm a Jim Croce stan.
Yeah, and look, I said it on the show. If Sam Cooke lived past 30, probably the greatest artist of all time.
Whoa.
Who I believe is currently Michael Jackson. So
I love it.
Yeah, whatever.
I love it.
Whatever. JD, let's end on this.
Love it.
Okay. There's a lot of good questions. The Truth, I was going to ask your question. I know you asked it yesterday. Come back on Tuesday. We'll talk about it. The Truth, very great, very loyal viewer. But I really like this. I want to ask it. I got to find it, though.
You're good.
Okay, Brandon Bradford says, someone please explain the Quinn Ewers hype. Makes no sense.
Wow, Quinn Ewers catching some strays. I don't think he's actually the only one that feels this way, because hasn't played a full season just yet. For me, it falls on there's two main points, I guess, as to why I believe Quinn Ewers is that guy. The first is strictly the game against Alabama, I think, has to be taken into account. And then what he did once he got back into the season in 2023, leading Texas to not just a Big 12 championship game, but a college football playoff berth. The pressure he had on him to take Texas to those heights was absolutely massive, and the way that he evolved his game from his first year at Texas to this past season, I think deserves a lot of credit. Also, statistically, like being in that 3,500-yard category and cutting down on the interceptions, like he deserves a lot of credit for that. So that's the first part of this. The other part of this is just strictly like the potential that he still has, I believe. Like he may be statistically the best on that list of 10 quarterbacks that we had for you a couple of weeks ago, which I ranked my top 10 quarterbacks in terms of projection to the end of the season. Carson Beck was 1, Quinn Ewers was 2. But Quinn Ewers in that offense, with the way that they attacked the portal and got him some more weapons to work with this season, another year in the system, like I still think his best ball is in front of him. And so for that reason, what I've seen so far and the potential projection that I think he still has, I'm very high on Quinn Ewers, man. Very, very high on Quinn Ewers.
Okay, Swervo Season, who disagrees about music with me, agrees with you, says Ewers is the heart of that football team.
There we go.
Right now. JD, really quick, I can't do the truth like that, so just really quick, hypothetical, who wins 2022 Georgia or 2018 Trevor Lawrence true freshman season Clemson?
Ooh, true freshman Trevor Lawrence, I love it, but he's a true freshman. He's a true freshman. I think Georgia that year with the way that Stetson Bennett was operating, and Nick, we were up there in the auxiliary press box when they 60-pieced TCU.
That we were.
I mean, that was a squad, man. So I'll go ahead and roll Georgia, and I think that's probably the way that would go there.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Yep.
Good stuff. Nick, appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
Multiple home runs coming up next week.
Well, I set the bar high for myself.
The prize pick number is going to be good.
Fulfill it. Yep.
Prize pick number is going to be good.
If you want to come, check out the Game Time app. I'm sure it'll be on there.
There we go. Use code HARDCOUNT. Get $20 off when you sign up. Heck yeah. Appreciate it, Nick. All right. Appreciate y'all being tuned in. I promised y'all the early part of this week some personal news. Nothing to do with where, with anything with the show specifically. But fired up. I just got to let y'all know because y'all are, I would say, a big part of my life and a big part of, what I think about when I go home and I think about the show. I think about y'all. Like some personal news. My wife and I are pregnant. So expecting a little girl here in the fall. Super fired up. Absolutely way in over my head. Definitely have no idea what I'm doing, but could not be more excited, could not be more grateful. If you've got dad notes, or you got, some play-by-play for us with what we can do to be more successful in that category, send it my way. But just could not be more fired up. Felt like it would be right to share that with y'all on this show at the end of the show for those that are still tuned in and are, kind of the sickos of this whole community. Appreciate y'all, man, and appreciate y'all allowing us to do this for a living. And can't wait to be a dad. So I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. We will be back on the air in Dallas, Texas. Can't wait to see y'all out there. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.